Bravo!
Thank you, all lovely people, for coming here today. I'm really grateful to see all your good faces. So I've got a few words here that I'd like to say to everyone here, and also to the people inside there sitting, working in the Behavioural Insights team. I hope you can hear the message that I'd like to communicate to you today. So I'd like to start by saying I'm speaking here today as a concerned citizen about some very dangerous human rights violations which are being coordinated by the organisation we are standing in front of, which calls itself the Behavioural Insights Team, or Nudge Unit. Behavioural psychology has now been integrated as part of government propaganda and crossed over to the criminal territory of coercion and malfeasance. Nudge Unit is coordinating a psychological operation on the British people on behalf of the Cabinet Office. In more simple terms, they are brainwashing the general public through the media to perceive a pandemic where in fact there is none. The SAGE group consists of more psychologists pushing the supplied behavioural psychology than real scientists, and that shows us that this whole crisis is more about perception than it is about evidence-based science. Thanks. The virus has never been proven to exist. It has not even been chemically isolated, and the so-called disease of COVID-19 has never even passed the gold standard of Koch's postulates, which is used to prove the existence of a pathogen. Vaccines cause serious harm and do not provide immunity against diseases. In fact, in most cases they cause harm, and it's widely known they are responsible for the spread of polio and mass sterility in the third world. A document called Mindspace was published by the Tory government in 2010. This document clearly shows the government boasting back then about how they intended to use brainwashing on the general public to get any desired behavioural change in people that they wished. Now I'd like to go on and quote some words from this document. The government needs to understand the ways it may be changing the behaviour of citizens unintentionally. It is quite possible that government produces unintended and possibly unwanted changes in behaviour. When you look at how people have been encouraged to self-police each other through social disapproval, public shaming and the outright bullying on social media to enforce these farcical COVID regulations, it's quite clear to me the government understands very well how their new psychological weapon is creating unintended changes in behaviour. But they simply do not care about the well-being of the average person. The document also went on to repeat many times, non-coercive, I quote. But this seems to me a thinly veiled way to mask their complete dishonesty and intent to manipulate, bully and nudge people, as they say, in any direction they see fit. On the 22nd of March, SAGE published a document entitled Options for Increasing Adherence to Social Distancing Measures. This document talks about using the media to increase a sense of personal threat. This is the exact persuasion and coercion Nudge Unit trade in. In other words, the fear levels were cranked up to bring compliance with so-called lockdown. There is recognition of physical harm or death due to the brainwashing of citizens, but these were callously disregarded in this new agenda of control. This ruling by fear would be the norm in North Korea or even Stalinist Russia. However, it's the new normal under Boris Johnson's regime. It is referenced in psychology that there are generally 5 main stages of brainwashing people. These are as follows. Number 1, isolation. Number 2, attacks on self-esteem. Number 3, us versus them. Number 4, blind obedience. And number 5, testing. Going through these stages and cross-referencing them with the behavioural nudges that have been implemented by the UK government, I will show you how the population has been brainwashed in this psychological operation without even realising it. Number one, isolation. When victims are on their own or at least separated from friends and family, they are more susceptible to this manipulation. The last thing a brainwasher wants is for someone with a different opinion to those questioning what they are now being asked to believe. This was the real reason for the lockdown and the isolation from family, friends, and the constant checking where and who people are with. The incessant guilt tripping over the media about stepping outside the house, or the posters all over the tube questioning whether journeys are really necessary. Does this sound familiar now when you know the real motive?
Yes.
Number two, attacks on self-esteem. A person who wants to brainwash another can only do so if their victim is in a vulnerable state and has low self-confidence. A broken person is much easier to rebuild with the brainwasher's beliefs. The building of Nightingale hospitals and morgues that were never used serve perfectly this agenda of fear and vulnerability in the general public. Also, the shaming of those who broke the lockdown rules by the press. The government sanctioned police harassment of people, for example, those sitting too long on benches in parks or eating picnics in places marked forbidden. The police have been shameful in their capitulation to these tyrannous and unlawful orders. Number three, I'll expand a bit more. Us versus them. In order to break a person down and reshape them in a different image, an alternate way of living must be introduced that is far more attractive than their present one. Phrases like the new normal will come to mind here. Or it can be that everyone wears a kind of uniform and other rigid rules that encourage a group dynamic. The wearing of masks and visors, which have been proven by countless doctors to be totally useless to prevent the spread of disease, is just this uniform. The real reason is not health. They are symbolic of those people who comply with the nonsense. Masks are attractive to people because they are a way to virtue signal a false form of empathy. Therefore, the wearer in his or her oxygen-starved state gets to feel a kind of giddy self-aggrandizement. Humans are by nature tribal and want to be part of a group. The brainwasher needs to convince their victim that they lead the elite group that everyone wants to be in. Masks are becoming a new fashion commodity, and many people even enjoy wearing their garish designs outdoors where no mandate is even present. So you see, at this stage we have the will of the people nearly broken. Number four, blind obedience. The end goal for a brainwasher is blind obedience, where the victim follows orders without question. This is usually achieved by positively rewarding the person when they please the brainwasher, and negative punishing them when they do not. Chanting a phrase over and over again is also a good way of controlling a person. The government has repeated countless three-word slogans such as stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS. The rule of repeat 3 times is a classical psychological manipulation tool. Weekly clapping for the NHS, which has been refusing sick people treatment for months, is clearly a sign of blind obedience. The rewards were the floor scheme payments for those who obediently stayed at home. And finally, number 5, testing. I would in fact argue that we are already at this stage. A brainwasher can never think that his or her work is done, as there are always scenarios where the victim could start to regain their own autonomy and start thinking for themselves again. The testing of victims not only shows that they are still brainwashed, it allows the brainwasher to see just how much control they still have over their victims. Such tests, I would point out, include the committing of criminal acts. We now have countless examples of these crimes. I shall name but a few. The suffocation of children with masks in schools. Signing of fraudulent COVID death certificates by doctors. The stealing of personal details in track and trace. The sharing of people's private medical records to third parties, which is a violation of the Hippocratic Oath, which all medics are supposed to be sworn to. The murder of the elderly in care homes through through mandated do not resuscitate forms, and I just found out recently that is now being applied to disabled children and other such people who are victims and not able to resist that, who we should be doing our utmost to protect. It's the new form of eugenics, yeah. It's fascistic eugenics, that's right. So, going on, a COVID-only NHS service where cancer patients are effectively left to die, forced and fraudulent PCR testing throughout the NHS. The list goes on and on. I could stay here all day listing crimes that people are now committing on a daily basis, but I'll move on. To conclude, when you ask yourself, why would the government be using brainwashing to tackle this so-called pandemic, it makes no sense, as all the actions so far seem badly planned. These actions seem badly planned and out of sequence. But when you realise the real motives, it makes total sense. That motive being to cause maximum fear in the population and coerce people to take the vaccines. Big pharmaceutical companies, the World Health Organization and Bill Gates stand to make vast profits on a global scale never before seen. Creating this fear also gives the government the perfect opportunity to roll out a tracking program for each individual vaccinated by using the proposed vaccine passports, which record personal data. People will be monitored and tracked at all times using this new generation of vaccines. This is in itself, it represents a deep threat to personal privacy issues and freedom. Our behaviour is key to this agenda, and that's why I'm saying no to their new normal, or abnormal as I would call it, their new control and manipulation. In a supposedly free and liberal country, policies of mind control have no place and are in direct opposition to the principles of democracy. Thank you. Thank you. I'll go on to say, these are in direct opposition to the principles of democracy, freedom of speech and freedom of choice. We now know no risk assessment was ever carried out in relation to the use of nudge technology and its effect on the mental and physical health of our nation. Its use has caused the deaths of probably thousands due to suicide, domestic abuse and malpractice in the hospitals. The UK government and Nudge Unit have committed crimes against humanity and should be brought to justice under English common law. To you people in there working for Nudge Department, I'd like to say to you all personally that you now have your own Nuremberg trials awaiting you.
Yeah.
You will be brought to account.
Way, here.
That's right, yeah, we saw that under the Third Reich, and we know better than that in this country, or we should know better at least. These conclusions are now clear to me, but don't just trust me. I always urge people to do their own research, and I will list a few good places to start, which include UK Column News, The Corbett Report, Dr. Vernon Coleman, Dr. Rashid Buttar, Dr. Eric Kaufman, Off Guardian, London Real, John Rappaport's medical blog, Children's Health Defence and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a good hero for this cause. He's doing great work. Just to conclude, I would like to end with some words from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. One word of truth outweighs the world. Thank you everyone for your time today listening to me. I appreciate it.